and we're also live streamed on Facebook. So to begin our fourth week, we have Professor Javier Leonardo Rugeria, a historian, a fellow Bicolano, and an Oragon. So, sir?
Mabalas tabi, Earl. Just maray na banggi po sa gabos na nagdadalan ngunyan to all our attendees or panelists and to everyone watching on Facebook Live. Good evening to everyone. We have to apologize first because this was supposed to be scheduled at 4 p.m. but we had to move it at 6 p.m. due to the scheduled power interruption. For this evening, I'll be delivering a lecture that's actually taken from my graduate thesis, a very small portion of my chapter 3 on Panganiban's sojourn in Barcelona. When Earl and I were discussing this lecture last week, he was actually telling me to deliver something about Panganiban. And he was telling me in jest that maybe it's best to deliver about Panganiban's death. At first, I responded in jest as well. I told him, maybe I could do a lecture on tuberculosis, the disease that killed Panganiban. To make it more timely to the COVID-19 pandemic, about diseases and sickness and how people respond, how people react or perceive these sicknesses. At first, it felt contrived. Akala namin pilit, pero with the readings that I had, I think it made a good lecture. So I hope this won't sound contrived at all to all of us tonight. But I'll be delivering a lecture which I titled Romantic Disease or Disease of the Romantic, Jose Maria Panganiban's Untimely Death and the White Plague in 19th-century Europe. So I'm Jai. I used to teach research at De La Salle University Integrated School, and I recently finished my graduate thesis on Panganiban. So this is a section from chapter 3. So for this evening, I have one overarching objective and 3 specific objectives. The first one is I locate Panganiban's death within the White Plague, quote-unquote White Plague, spread across Europe in the 19th century. And more importantly, against the social, cultural, as well as the scientific constructions of the disease during the said period. More specifically, I discuss significant events leading to Panganiban's death between June 1889 to August 90. He died August 19 of 1890. So this will not be a biographical lecture. I will not be talking about Panganiban from his birth until his time at UST, until the time he departed for Europe. So I'll be talking more about his time in Europe, more particularly his last year and 2 months before he died. And second, I'll be examining scientific understandings of the disease in the late 19th century, with particular emphasis on Robert Koch. Robert Koch, he's a German scientist, and Juan Luis Hor, he's a Spanish scientist as well. And then I also explain social and cultural perceptions of the disease or of the person who contracted such a disease. I explain why tuberculosis was regarded widely as a romantic disease. Before anything else, some biographical notes on Panganiban. He left the University of Santo Tomas on May 1888 to pursue his medical studies at the University of Barcelona. He was a founding member of Asociación La Solidaridad. He was the editor. If I'm not mistaken, Galicano Apacible was the president of that organization, inaugurated in December 31, 1888. By March of 1889, he became a regular contributor for the organ, La Solidaridad. Graciano Lopez Hines started the periodical on February 15. So a few issues later, Panganiban started contributing articles, beginning with the March 15, 1889 issues. His most salient contributions to the periodical included an essay on press freedom. It's actually very timely given what just transpired earlier this afternoon, the NTC and the ABS-CBN shutdown. Why is the press important? Panganiban was philosophizing on this question. Another salient contribution is his 3-part essay titled La Universidad de Manila. It was a three-part criticism of his alma mater, UST. He criticized several facets of the university. It's actually the subject of my thesis for my grad school. In the spring of 1889, Panganiban moved residence with Galicano Apacible at Plaza de Estudios. It's very fortunate for our generation, the digital residents, if I may consider myself one, that we have the benefit of digital libraries. So I was able to come up with these pictures. I was able to find these pictures from the Biblioteca Nacional de España. So I was able to visualize where Panganiban revolved during his time in Barcelona, around 1888 to his death in 1890. The first picture that you see at the top left corner is the facade of the University of Barcelona. And then the picture to your right is the Calle Real of Barcelona. Then the picture to your lower left is where he stayed with Galicano Apacible. That's Plaza de Estudios. So dun siya tumira for a time, I believe from May of 1889 until he died. And then the next picture, the one in the middle, is the picture of the Exposición in Barcelona in 1888. So these are very beautiful pictures of Barcelona in the late 19th century. So in case you're wondering where Panganiban's life revolved around during those times, you can imagine with the help of these pictures. The map that you see there, the right corner, you see at the upper part near number 10, there's a label there that says Rambla Estudios. The building that is situated along that street is where Panganiban lived. So you see here a map of the main thoroughfares of Barcelona in the late 19th century. So number 10 is Rambla de Estudios, or the Plaza de Estudios. It's where he resided with Apacible from 1889 until around the time of his death in 1890. So that's a map of the thoroughfare. So the building, the picture of that building to your left is Rambla or Plaza de Estudios, or in some sources, Plaza de Enseñanza. So dyan tumira si Panganiban along with Galicano Apacible. Ponce, Jaena, and Del Pilar, they live nearby somewhere in the street called Rambla de Canaletas. So nasa unahan lang ng Rambla de los Estudios. So after having published his three-part column, La Universidad de Manila in La Solidaridad, Panganiban's health had grown delicate and caused him to stop writing for the periodical and would later be compelled to abandon his medical studies from the University of Barcelona. Beginning with the June 15, 1889 issue, Panganiban had gone on an indefinite hiatus from the periodical. So he was compelled to stop working for a time. He did not actually publish any columns, any essays, or any short stories for the next 25 issues. Panganiban, yung sunod na article ni Panganiban, lalabas siya around July of 1890, about a month before his death. So titingnan natin later, ano ba yung nangyari doon sa time na yon. In June 23 of 1889, Mariano Ponce wrote Rizal a letter informing the latter of Panganiban's worsening health condition. According to Ponce, and I quote, Panganiban is sick and therefore had to stop working. And on July 9, Ponce wrote a follow-up letter to Rizal telling the latter that it wasn't certain if Panganiban can still continue writing the La Universidad de Manila columns. Bale yung La Universidad de Manila columns, pinublish po siya noong April 15, April 30, and then May 31 of La Solidaridad. So three-part column siya, supposedly my continuation, but because Panganiban was unable to work for the periodical, he was compelled to drop the project. And if you can read my thesis later on in chapter 4, I mentioned there that Del Pilar, Ponce, and the rest would continue what Panganiban had started. So it was an interrupted campaign for educational reforms in the Philippines. So according to Ponce, furthermore, he said that Panganiban seems resentful that La Solidaridad did not mention his illness. We shall try to satisfy him, for we attribute his temper to his sickness. So this is around July 9 of 1889 may sakit na si Panganiban. And we already know that he was already experiencing some symptoms. Although during that time, hindi pa nila tinatawag na pulmonary tuberculosis. They called it phthisis, or in some cases, hemoptysis. Yung hemoptysis ay yung pagbubo ng dugo or the coughing of blood. Some would call it consumption. The English writers, they call it consumption. So yung pulmonary tuberculosis na terminology, later na lang siya, late 19th century or early 20th century when it became more popular. Pero before that, it's called phthisis. That's Greek, which means wasting. Wasting. The body is wasting or decaying. Kaya phthisis yung tawag sa disease. So yung tanong natin dito, in the absence of historical sources, what could Panganiban had possibly, what exactly did Panganiban experience during this time, during the time that he was experiencing the symptoms of tuberculosis? So tuberculosis, according to Sir Arthur Newsholme, he's an English writer, physician, he wrote a book called The Prevention of Tuberculosis. And he listed the following terms to refer to tuberculosis of the lungs. So you have phthisis or pulmonary phthisis, which I mentioned means wasting. Pulmonary tuberculosis became more popular early 20th century, and then consumption is the more popular term for the disease. Panganiban was already experiencing hemoptysis. By around July 1, Rizal told Ponce that Panganiban was experiencing coughing of blood and therefore was in a very serious illness and had to stop working. So I do not claim to be a medical expert here. I actually consulted with my MD friends to make sure that I'm giving the correct information. But in a nutshell, pulmonary tuberculosis is a respiratory disease that infects and damages the lungs, which leads to oxygen deprivation. So yung ilan sa mga effects ng tuberculosis, it includes hormonal changes, and it results further into the person or the patient's decrease in appetite, kaya inevitably pumapayat yung pasyente. The body weight, the patient normally loses body weight, and iron production also decreases. Kaya anemic, or kung makikita mo yung patient, namumuti, ashen skin, yung description ng mga English writers, sa isang tao na merong pulmonary tuberculosis. So anemic yung tao yan. Microbes can spread through the skeletal system as well. So the manifestations or the symptoms can also include back pains. It can also include abdominal pains, as well as migraines or headaches or nervous system. At least during that time, this is how tuberculosis was understood. Definitely, with the advancement of science, our physicians would have more things to say about this disease now than before. But what are the symptoms of pulmonary tuberculosis? Well, there are no sources that explicitly mention what Panganiban experienced, except the source where Rizal mentions that he was suffering from hemoptysis or from the coughing of blood. But the other symptoms could also include the following: irritating cough, accompanied by abundant expectoration of mucopurulent material. And then, of course, hectic fever and cold sweats at night. It didn't help that Panganiban was in a temperate country, so mas mahirap dahil malamig. And then emaciation, or the state of being abnormally thin. So you just imagine Panganiban being abnormally thin during those times. And then the patient is always languid, meaning to say he suffers from weakness. Nangihina siya palagi. And to top it all off, you have the coughing of blood, hemoptysis. So normally ito yung symptoms ng pulmonary tuberculosis during, not only during that time, but also now. So this is what Rizal wrote on July 1, 1889 to Mariano Ponce. He mentions that he's very sorry to know that Panganiban is sick, and he even consulted Blumentritt, and Blumentritt said that Panganiban was suffering from hemoptysis, or the coughing of blood. And Rizal furthermore said that he is a man of very good inclinations, and we will lose much if he becomes seriously ill. So this is around July 1 of 1889. So we know for a fact that from June, July 1889, Panganiban was already sick, and therefore he was compelled to lay aside his work. He was also compelled to lay aside his medical studies, but he continued his participation in political circles. Sumasama pa rin siya sa Masonic Lodge. No? He was a part of the Masonic Lodge called Revolucion. This is the Barcelona-based Masonic Lodge. So kahit may sakit na siya around September of that year, 1889, he was elevated as one of the highest ranking officials of Lodge Revolucion. So yun yung sinasabi ng sources so far. Hindi natin alam kung ano pa yung ibang nangyari. But what we can tell from the silence of the sources is that Panganiban stopped writing for La Solidaridad. And Schumacher also argues that he went on with his political activities despite his ailing condition, despite his worsening health condition. Now, we proceed to part 2 of this discussion. How do people perceive the disease during that time? Or what were the sociocultural meanings during that time of tuberculosis? Well, for starters, it was seen or regarded by people in the 19th century as, quote, a romantic disease. So how could a disease as bad as tuberculosis perceived as romantic? So may sinite akong examples dito. Titingnan natin kung ano ba yung pananaw or punto de vista ng ilang manunulat or ng ilang novelista, ng ilang mga manunulat tungkol sa tuberculosis. Of course, we should not judge this according to the categories were present kasi it will sound laughable to us now, but during that time, this is how they perceived it. And we should not look at the past through the lenses of our present. You know? So let's try to have a presupposition-less mindset when we listen to these things from writers. So according to this slide, phthisis was often associated with romanticism. So if you're familiar with romanticism, it's a movement that was a reaction to the violences, to the over-rationality, over-scientific period of modernity. So it's an alternative way of viewing reality or life. So instead of emphasizing purpose, you take a look at passion instead, or intuition. Instead of emphasizing reason, you emphasize emotion in place of reason. So in a nutshell, that's what romanticism is about. So it was a reaction to modernity. It was a reaction to the rationality and how everything was just simply expressed in scientific terms. So romanticism ito. So yung phthisis or yung tuberculosis, it came to be the object of poems, novels, short stories, paintings, operas, etc., written of course by romantics. And if you will see here in the same slide, Edgar Allan Poe would say that TB or phthisis was actually the disease of an easy, beautiful death. It's a disease of an easy, beautiful death. So if there's a perfect way to die, if there's a most beautiful way to die, it's to die in the hands of tuberculosis, at least according to Edgar Allan Poe. According to Susan Sontag, she also associated the disease with poverty and deprivation. Later, we will see that Panganiban experienced both in Barcelona. So, tinigil kasi yung sustento kay Panganiban, yung allowance niya, yung pension niya. So he was not able to consult a doctor. He was not able to travel. He was not able to buy whatever medicine was needed, if there was even any medicine during that time. So Susan Sontag was quick to say that this disease was associated with poverty and deprivation as well. So this is an example of a poem written by a romantic. So si John Keats, he's a romantic poet, and he also died of tuberculosis when he was 25. And he wrote this poem, An Ode to a Nightingale, where he mentions, there's a stanza there that is referring to the symptoms of phthisis or tuberculosis. So if I may read the stanza, it reads, fade far away, dissolve and quite forget. What thou among the leaves hast never known, the weariness, the fever, and the fret, here where men sit and hear each other groan. where palsy shakes a few sad last gray hairs, where youth grows pale and spectre thin and dies. Where but to think is to be beautiful, is to be full of sorrow, sorry, and lead an eye despairs, where beauty cannot keep her lustrous eyes, or new love pine at them beyond tomorrow. So ito yung kanyang allusion dun sa thesis, this stanza right here in his poem, An Ode to a Nightingale. I think he wrote this 1819 or 1820, about 5 years before he died, a few years before he died. Another example is an excerpt from a short story written by Edgar Allan Poe. And he mentions here the term consumption, which refers to tuberculosis. And the quote reads, "The beautiful Lady Mary, how could she die? And of consumption. But it is a path I have prayed to follow. I wish all I love to perish in that gentle disease. How glorious to depart in the heyday of the young blood, the heart of all passion, the imagination all fire, amid the remembrances of happier days. In the fall of the year, and so be buried up forever in the gorgeous autumnal leaves." Edgar Allan Poe compared phthisis to the season of autumn. It's like the human person experiencing the season of autumn. Kasi bakit? Ano ba nangyayari sa autumn? Taglagas to, di ba? Naglalagas ng dahon yung mga punong kahoy. In the same way, naglalagas din yung human person. The person is wasting and awaiting his or her death. So it's widely regarded as a romantic disease because people think it's the most beautiful way to die. People think you can plan the next few months or years of your life before you die. It's a prolonged battle against the disease. But in the latter part of the 19th century, the disease will come to have a different meaning. And this is a departure from the romantic meaning of the disease. It says here, James Copeland, a Scottish physician, he associated tuberculosis with moral degradation, thought to be caused by the modern social order and the urbane life. So kasama dyan yung alcoholism, yung mga manginginom ng 19th century, promiscuity, dalliances, among other deviations from what he called, quote, culturally accepted lifestyles. So it's funny that I was able to come across this one because Panganiban, during his time in Barcelona, was actually involved in a scandal. And not too many biographers of the propagandist will be comfortable or willing to share this. I wrote in my thesis, chapter 3, that Panganiban's last few months in Barcelona was mired in scandal. So on June 24, 1890, an apprehensive Mariano Ponce wrote to Rizal about the trouble Panganiban has gotten himself into. He had been having an affair with a married Spanish woman and had been caught, according to Panganiban. He committed a very serious error of giving to the woman papers pertaining to his studies and of writing her an indiscreet letter, which the husband soon found in his wife's keeping. For a time, Panganiban went hiding at Canon's house at San Gervasio until one Saturday evening he was caught strolling at the Plaza de Catalunya by the husband accompanied by a friend and gave Panganiban a serious beating. Despite his failing health condition and his frail constitution, Panganiban defended himself with all his might and even knocked one of them down, but a blow to the head sent him bloodied to the ground. So you can just imagine, Panganiban was already weak, he was already languid, he was emaciated, and yet he suffered a beating because of his dalliances, because of his adventures, so to speak, romantic adventures. Sabi nga niya ni Teodoro Agoncillo, nakakatawa man isipin, pero yung kanyang moniker, if I may call it that, yung El Vengador del Honor Filipino, the Avenger of Filipino Honor, taon-taon pinapaskil yan sa Central One during the birth anniversary of Panganiban. And sometimes I can't help but cringe because it started out as a joke to Graciano Lopez Haina, that moniker, to summarize pretty much his romantic adventures in Barcelona. So it sounds so patriotic, so noble, but it's actually a summary, or it actually captures his his dalliances in Barcelona. So the next time you see that banner go up again, let's rethink what it actually means. No? El Vengador del Honor Filipino, the Avenger of Filipino Honor. Diba? Ang ganda pakinggan. Pero kapag inaral natin kung ano yung konteksto ng phrase na yon nung sinabi niya kay Lopez Haina, it actually means something else. No? And Teodoro Agoncillo, writing in 1974, he said that it might have just been the summary or it might have captured what Panganiban did in Barcelona during his last year. So yung kanyang mga adventures, romantic adventures. Now, going back to this point right here, it was associated with moral degradation. So the scandal actually caught the public eye in Barcelona. And the recklessness of Panganiban and his indiscretion elicited speculations among the people, attributing his demise to the vices, quote-unquote, the vices in which he had indulged in the last days of his life. This is Lopez Haina writing in 1891. And then Lopez Haina, Panganiban's confidant, was quick to come to his defense and dispel these accusations in an August 31, 1891 article in La Solidaridad. So, sinulat ko po ito sa thesis ko. So, babasahin ko yung part na yun. Ano? Sabi ko dito, setting the record straight, he insisted that his friend died due to the lack of the most necessary, most essential for his convalescence after his prolonged sickness since he came here from Manila. Money for the trip his doctors had advised him to take. So, dinipensahan ni Lopez Haina yung speculations, yung mga haka-haka sa Barcelona, that Panganiban died because of his dalliances or of his promiscuity. So, ina-associate yung tuberculosis sa moral degradation. Kasama dyan yung promiscuity at dalliances. Na, unfortunately, guilty rin naman si Panganiban. At may sources tayo to back to that up. Now, in spite of those sociocultural meanings, or maybe because of these unscientific meanings, the late 19th century saw the scientific advancements and understandings, or in understanding the disease. So in 1882, a German scientist, Robert Koch, discovered the tubercle bacillus as the etiologic agent responsible for TB or phthisis. So, yung etiologic agent, pag sinabing etiology, gusto sabihin, in layman's terms, ito yung cause ng isang disease, etiology. The etiologic agent responsible for TB was tubercle bacillus. And therefore, his findings mentioned that tuberculosis is bacterial, a bacterial disease. So he presented his findings at the Physiological Society of Berlin on March 24, 1882. And then he also published his findings in a paper titled Die Etiologie der Tuberkulose in Berliner Klinischen Wochenschrift on April 10, 1882. So it was reprinted actually by Oxford University in December 8, 1982, during the 100th anniversary of Robert Koch's discovery. Bacterial ang tuberculosis. More than being a romantic disease, sabi ni Robert Koch, it's caused by mycobacillus. Furthermore, he mentions that 1 out of 7 humans die of tuberculosis. And he further mentions, and I quote, if the importance of the disease for mankind is measured from the number of fatalities which are due to it, then tuberculosis must be considered much more important than those most feared infectious diseases, such as plagues, cholera, and the like. That's according to Koch. And he concluded that tuberculosis is a bacterial disease. And since they are rod-shaped, he observed it under the microscope, or using a microscope, they belong to the group of bacilli. So mycobacillus, yung bacteria na nagkukos ng tuberculosis. My doctor friends tell me it's airborne, it's contagious, and that it's also endemic in the Philippines. Hindi lang natin siguro alam dahil latent yung sa iba, pero nagmamanifest din ito eventually. No? Kapag malakas yung immune system, walang problema. Pero kapag immunocompromised ka, halimbawa meron kang diabetes, for example, if you're pregnant, for example, uh, definitely you're susceptible to having this bacterial disease. So ito yung revolutionary finding ni Koch when it comes to tuberculosis. And it somehow dispelled the romantic notion of the disease. Thankfully, dahil kung romantic pa rin yung pagtingin natin sa tuberculosis, baka gustuhin natin mamatay with this disease pa rin, But with Koch's discovery, we are led to this attitude towards the disease that it's unsanitary, that we have to be more hygienic, that we have to get rid of this bacteria. So that's Robert Koch. And he mentions furthermore, up until now, my studies have shown that the characteristic bacillus is always associated with tuberculosis, and that these bacilli can be obtained from tuberculous organs and isolated in pure culture. I was asking my doctor friends, how do you diagnose tuberculosis now? During Panganiban's time, he did not have the benefit of x-rays or vaccines and antibiotics. Yung x-ray, na-invento lang siya noong 1895 ni Wilhelm Röntgen, 1895. The vaccine came around 1921, and the antibiotics, of course, developed much later. So he suffered the disease without the benefit of. Koch concluded that all of these facts taken together led to the conclusion that the bacilli, which are present in the tuberculous substances, not only accompany the tuberculosis process, but are the cause of it. And the bacillus, we have therefore the actual infecting agent. So because of this discovery in 1882, sunod-sunod na po yung naging scientific advancements when it comes to the disease. So nagkaroon na tayo ng vaccine pagdating ng 1921. Then of course antibiotics became the go-to prophylaxis, or the prophylaxis kasi kung paano mo gagamutin, how do you treat a certain disease. So dati wala pa silang benefit ng antibiotics. So ano yung naging reseta ni Rizal? Let's remember that Jose Rizal was a medical doctor. So in the absence of antibiotics, this was the prescription of Rizal to Panganiban, which he told to Ponce on July 1, 1889. He said, "Therefore, I would tell him to lay aside now all his work, take arsenic in very small doses, and take baths in the sea." Yung Barcelona po kasi may body of water south of the city. So take baths in the sea is one of Rizal's prescription. I'm not so sure if it has an actual, if it's medically sound to say that, no, na baka gumaling if you take bath in the sea. But at least during their time, Rizal thought that it was a good response to the disease. It was a good treatment to the disease. So in conclusion, Panganiban suffered pulmonary tuberculosis at a time when scientific understandings of the disease was relatively new. Bagong-bago pa. He did not have the benefit of x-rays for diagnosis, antibiotics for prophylaxis, and vaccines. Yung x-ray, yan yung go-to method ng mga doctors nun for its diagnosis. But for now, my doctor friends tell me na sputum, no? So, Buduraka, culture bacteria, that's how they do diagnosis now. But during that time, the doctors, they rely on x-rays. Then antibiotics were developed later on. It was also seen as the disease of the promiscuous. So nasabi ko kanina na moral degradation din yung pananaw ng mga tao kapag may tuberculosis yung isang pasyente. No? So Panganiban was actually guilty of that because he was involved in a scandal in 1890, sorry. And I'm not so sure if may correlation ba, may causation ba, but it was at least how people perceived it in the late 19th century. And finally, Panganiban may have suffered the disease, but the physical beating that he got sometime June 1890, sorry, might have exacerbated his already worsening condition, and in my opinion, might have accelerated his death. So that's all for me tonight. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, please just direct it to the panel and Earl will convey it to me. Maraming salamat po.
Okay. Thank you, Sir Dijay, for that very for that very wonderful and insightful lecture. So this is actually my first Panganiban lecture. Yun yung sabi ko sa kanya nung while we were trying to organize the talk. So again, salamat po for that very insightful lecture. Okay, we can now entertain questions. So please feel free to type your questions. To our panelists, you can actually direct your questions. You can just turn on your microphones and your video. Darren Avestres is with us.
Actually, may magandang question si Vanessa
Okay.
from Vanessa Romero. According to her, were there other members from Panganiban's political circle who also acquired the disease? Actually, hindi ko minention kanina para ma-bring up. Since even though he's ill, he would still meet them and TB is contagious. Or is TB that time not contagious as the TB we know of today? Actually, contagious po yung TB, hindi naman siguro siya nagbago dahil pareho yung etiologic agent niya. It's caused by bacteria. It was contagious. It is still contagious. And to answer your question, Vanessa, yes, there were. Si Marcelo del Pilar saka si Graciano Lopez Haina, lingid sa kaalaman po natin, namatay sila because of tuberculosis in 1896. Although it was later on. No? So 6 na taon after Panganiban had died. And then si Feliciano Timbang Gonzalez, a native of Mexico, Pampanga, and he also went to UST with Panganiban. Actually, classmates sila sa UST. And then sabay sila umalis for Barcelona. Pagdating sa Barcelona, around a year later, after Gonzalez arrived, nagkasakit din siya and he died of tuberculosis. Coincidentally, on the same date as Panganiban's date of death, no, August 19, 1889, namatay si Feliciano Gonzalez Timbang. Si Panganiban, namatay siya August 19, 1890. So exactly a year earlier, may namatay na silang kasama sa reform movement. No? So si Feliciano Gonzalez Timbang, yung pangalan niya hindi masyadong naririnig dahil wala siya masyadong sinulat. Pero kapag binasa niya yung mga letters ni Ponce kay Rizal, mababanggit si Feliciano Gonzalez Timbang ng ilang beses. Tapos sa UST archives din, maraming documents that pertain to him.
Okay, thank you. May mga tanong pa po ba from other participants or panelists? Okay. Sige. Well, I guess or in Facebook. Okay. So, well, siguro nag-iisip pa yung mga iba. I have a question.
Sure.
In physical anthropology, actually, yung on osteology, yung TB from what I know pwede mo siyang makita sa bones. So were there any research works on, 'di ba, yung buto ni Panganiban ni-repatriate na to the
Philippines? Yeah.
Were there any like osteological analysis to cross-check Panganiban's bones if he really died through TB?
That's a nice question, Earl. A few years ago, I think archaeologists they found bones. I'm not sure where, and then na-detect nila doon na may mycobacillus yung bones. With regards to Panganiban, ito kasi nung nilibing si Panganiban noong 1890, nirerentahan pa yung space niya. Pero pagdating ng 1891, wala nang nag-sustain dun sa nicho niya sa Barcelona. And this is according to Domingo Abella. Sabi niya, so nilipat si Panganiban sa isang public cemetery. No? So yung mga buto niya nasama na dun sa buto ng ibang nakalibing doon sa public cemetery. And therefore, when Domingo Abella repatriated Panganiban's bones, it was very difficult for him to find out which of those bones are actually Panganiban's. So doon pa lang, parang hindi niya na alam kung sino doon si Panganiban. Kasi ang daming nakalibing doon sa public cemetery na yun. No? uh, doon pa lang sa circumstance na yon, mahirap nang aralin kung talagang nagka-TB siya. Ano yung tawag doon? Sorry, osteologic, di ba?
Yeah, osteology.
Osteologic. Mahirap na magkaroon ng osteologic examination sa buto. Kasi for all we know, baka yung repatriate na buto, hindi naman siguro yun kay Panganiban. And I'm not so sure if there's still a way to find out if that's his, no? But that's actually very interesting from the side of physical anthropology. It's something that history can no longer provide. And maganda rin sana kung may study that could supplement what history tells us. Kasi yung anthropology, ang ganda rin. Ganda rin yung pinoprovide niya na insights sa atin. But unfortunately, mahirap kasi hindi natin nga alam kung yung buto na inuwi ni Abella dito ay kay Panganiban talaga. So with that limitation pa lang or with that circumstance pa lang, it would be difficult.
Okay. Before that, we have 3 questions, but to follow up, I guess from what I know, if we can trace Panganiban's yung family, yung mga descendants ni Panganiban, or like close relatives of Panganibans, we can do a DNA analysis for that, and we can actually ID the bones through the DNA. So probably if we have some physical anthropologists kung magkakaroon tayo ng access to those bones, it's a possibility. Hindi
Baka
siya impossible.
pwedeng gawin niya ng Partido State University. Para may funding. Kasi medyo mahal yung project niya.
Yeah.
You have to exhume the bones, you have to do osteologic analysis, examination.
Sige. We'll go back on that probably soon. So we have a question from Darren Avestruz. So Panganiban, Del Pilar, and Lopez Haina were a few of the propagandists that we know who have died of the disease. Was being away from their homeland in any way also contributed in the romanticizing of their respective deaths?
Respective deaths. Okay, very interesting question from Darren. Was being away from their homeland in any way also did it contribute to romanticizing of their respective deaths? In the first place, hindi ko sure kung niromanticize nga nila yung pagkamatay nila. No? Unlike Edgar Allan Poe, and like who's this guy, John Keats, Jane Austen, etc. Hindi natin alam kung niromanticize nga ba talaga nila. We'll have to look at sources. We'll have to look at letters if they indeed see their deaths in that way. So as to Darren's question, I honestly don't have the sources now, so I couldn't really address it. But maybe later we can find that out.
Okay, thank you. So there's another question from Jopet, Virtuso. Was arsenic really the go-to drug back then for TB? Well, we all know how the poisonous the substance is today, and how wacky medical prescriptions were back in the late 19th century.
Mm-hmm. Actually, nagulat ako bakit arsenic eh. Hinanap ko kung ano yung arsenic, and I think Jopet is right. It's a poisonous drug. It's a poisonous substance. I'm not really sure if it was the drug back then, but it was Rizal's prescription. He's a medical doctor. So what does it tell us? Maybe that was the prescription. Kaya nga small doses siguro yung sinabi ni Rizal. Kasi an overdose of arsenic can be harmful to a patient's body. So as to Jopet's question, maybe yes. Maybe yes, dahil ako, I would have to trust Rizal's judgment on it. He's a medical doctor. He specialized, although hindi siya pulmonologist, specialized siya in ophthalmology. Pero I'd like to think he still knows what he was doing. I don't think he will prescribe something to Panganiban that's harmful, that would accelerate the death of the latter. So maybe it was. Kasi with Rizal, a medical doctor, prescribing it. But it needs further research. It needs more sources to corroborate on that claim.
Okay, I guess a little bit similar to what you're pointing out. So there's a question again from Vanessa. How was consumption cured by doctors aside from Rizal back then?
Aside from Rizal,
are there also cases of TB in the okay, I think this is a different question. Okay, the first question from Vanessa was, how was consumption consumption cured by doctors aside from Rizal back then?
I see.
And yeah, and another
Uh,
question was, are there also cases of TB in the Philippines during that time?
mm. Well, to answer the second question, I do not have the data, unfortunately. But American sources will definitely provide us with the data, especially early 20th century. Definitely may cases in tuberculosis, but we just don't know the gravity or the magnitude of the disease. As to the first question, how was consumption cured by doctors aside from Rizal back then? As I mentioned, Panganiban experienced the disease at the time when physicians were just discovering the etiologic agent or the cause of the disease. So it was very difficult for them to prescribe medicines. They were simply figuring out how to cure the disease. But if anything, if this is actually relevant to the question, there were several studies during that time that tried to examine what is the prophylaxis of tuberculosis. And pwede kong i-share later siguro kay Vanessa kung ano yung source na yun. It's in Spanish nga lang, but we can always have it translated. And ina-examine doon ni Juan Luis Hor, yung, hindi ko na nga na-mention si Hor kanina, in the interest of brevity. But Juan Luis Hor, his dissertation at the University of Cadiz studied the prophylaxis of tuberculosis. So inaral niya kung ano yung gamot back then. But during that time, as I mentioned, talagang finifigure out pa ng mga doctors kung ano ba yung, parang yung sitwasyon natin ngayon sa COVID. No? The doctors are still figuring out kung ano yung vaccine, ano yung gamot na pwede natin gamitin to combat coronavirus. In the same way, during that time, they were actually figuring out how to combat tuberculosis. So even if there were studies, say for instance by Juan Luis Hor, we're not even sure if that prophylaxis is effective. No? Pero yung, in my opinion, yung talagang effective na prophylaxis dumating noong 1921, nung na-discover yung bakuna, yung vaccine sa tuberculosis. Kasi even if there were studies of prophylaxis of the disease, pagdating ng first decade ng 20th century, parang lumala pa yung tuberculosis in Europe. So may data ako dito ng England and Wales. Yung numbers ng deaths sa England and Wales ng 1904, it actually reached 67,000 people who died of tuberculosis. So ganun ka grave, ganun ka laki yung disease back then in the early part of the 20th century.
Okay.
So sige.
Sorry. Okay. Thank you. So there's a question from sa Facebook Live natin from Miss Jovi Cadores. So was Panganiban promiscuous even before he got TB? Or were there records of him being a romantic, hence he committed such promiscuity?
Nako. Okay. I knew I was gonna get that question. Pero ang limitation kasi kay Panganiban, very scanty yung sources. Sa totoo lang, Earl, baka ito na yung last lecture ko na i-deliver tungkol kay Panganiban. Ano? Kasi sa tingin ko, na-extract ko na lahat for my thesis. Tingin ko, napiga ko na lahat ng sources. Napiga ko na lahat ng pwede may isulat on him. As the question, kung promiscuous na ba siya bago siya nagka-disease, there's no way to find out unless we can find a source, unless we can find a letter. Ang hirap kasi dito, sinunog, walang surviving letter si Panganiban. Yung siya nagsulat, yung siya mismo nagsulat ng letter. And what's more intriguing here, what's more curious or conspicuous is the fact that all the letters pertaining to the scandal are absent. So pag tinignan mo yung mga letters ni Rizal, ni Del Pilar, wala kang makikitang pinag-usapan nila yung scandal. So chances are baka sinunog yun, baka dinispose nila yun. They did not intend to preserve it, maybe. So unfortunately, Jovi, I could not answer that question unless we can find a credible source. Mahirap sagutin yun. We can only speculate. We can only rely on our historical imagination.
Okay. Are there any questions or clarifications from our panelists or attendees here at Zoom or sa Facebook natin?
Nakakatawa yung chat dito sa Zoom.
Oo nga eh.
Pero hindi
Wala
ko
nang
na
liquor
babasahin
ban.
to. Oh.
Okay. I guess probably last question.
Sige,
It's
last question.
uh, okay. See,
Sino to? Si Darren ba to?
there's another question from Darren.
Si
Were
Darren to?
symptoms of the disease already known to people at that time or ordinary
Oo.
people at that time?
Oo naman, definitely. Definitely. Kaya nga it proliferated the idea of a white plague, no? Kasi yung appearance ng isang tao na may tuberculosis, nangangayayat siya, tapos namumuti, no? Ashen skin, tapos makikita rin natin na ano yung tao, no? Lagi siyang fatigued, lagi siyang pagod. So alam na nila ano yung symptoms ng disease. Yun nga lang, it was known by a different name. Iba yung tawag sa tuberculosis nung at least nung early part of the 19th century.
Okay. I think there's follow-up or it's already okay. Okay. So there's from Facebook again, from Mr. Ernest Asens. So a very good topic. Can we actually say that we tend to romanticize a certain disease, especially in the absence of known cure?
I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure if it can be said with all diseases. Kasi hindi ko alam kung may nagro-romanticize pa ng COVID ngayon. You know? Pero during that time, they were romanticizing it because simply because it was a prolonged death. It was a prolonged suffering. So the poets, saka nagkataon din kasi na doon nag-emerge yung romanticism noong time na yun. So I'd like to think na nagkataon na nag-overlap na may disease ng 19th century tapos rise din ng romanticism. So naging object ng tula nila yun, object ng short stories, even paintings. Yung nasa cover slide ko kanina is actually a painting by Cristobal Rojas, painted in 1886. He also died of tuberculosis, the same year as Panganiban did. So marami, it's widespread. Maraming sikat na tao ang namatay sa tuberculosis. Kaya din siya niro-romanticize kasi prolonged yung mga deaths nila. So they still had time to plan things. They had time to talk to people or spend time with their loved ones. So it was seen as something like that. I'm not so sure now, or I'm not so sure for other diseases. Kung tinignan din ba siya as something that's romantic. Especially yung cholera, di ba? I don't think tinignan yun ng mga tao as something romantic.
Okay. There's another, okay lang?
Sure. No problem.
There's another question sa Q&A section, hindi sa chat box. Okay. I was just wondering why Europe was greatly affected by World's Plague. Is it because of the geography or demography or any other reason?
That's a nice question. I will attribute it to urbanization. Kasi nung end of 18th century, 19th century, syempre yung mga cities, yung mga malalaking cities, London, you have Berlin, you have Paris. In Spain, you have Madrid and Barcelona. Saan lumaki yung mga cities sa Europe. And with urbanization, syempre, sabi mga Earl kanina, demographic, dumami rin yung tao. Nagsipuntahan din sila sa cities. And of course, dahil maraming tao sa mga syudad, syempre, naging unsanitary, naging marumi yung mga lungsod na yun. So, it's not surprising to see that people who live in London or in Paris or in, say, Barcelona contracted tuberculosis because these cities became unsanitary. Naging madumi siya because of peopling of the cities. Dumami yung tao sa mga lungsod. So urbanization to me is one leading factor, perhaps, of the spread of the disease in the 19th century.
I think just to add, I guess for some, for dun sa nagtanong, I think you can go back to Dr. Ian Morley's lecture on urban cities and also on Dr. Acabado's transoceanic exchange. There are some, some some perspectives that might also give context to the question. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, I guess, okay. Is there any question
Pero
from
may
Darren?
question pa tayo sa webinar chat natin.
Ah,
Dami ah.
si Sir Darren, he will be doing a lecture next week. So, excited
Oo
na. Okay.
Oo nga eh.
Sige.
Babawi ako dito next week.
Okay. Let's entertain another question from Darren. Okay. Or was it only the historians who wrote pieced together the narratives that actually romanticized their deaths? A follow-up question from Sir
Mm,
Darren.
mm. I'd like to think so. I'd like to think so. Kasi nga yung ano natin, 'di ba, yung Avenger of Filipino Honor, 'di ba, dumating sa generation natin as something that sounds so romantic and patriotic and noble. You know, siguro, Darren, you can say that, especially maybe I'm not claiming that this is true, but maybe the nationalist historians will have something to do about that. You know, the state historians, sila yung nag-piece together ng narrative na ito nga, Panganiban is the champion or the vanguard of liberalism, or the champion of press freedom, the champion of education, etc., etc., and then the Avenger of Filipino Honor. So, so siguro yung Avenger of Filipino Honor is I'm not sure if it's Panganiban's way to romanticize his death, but I'm sure that he said it in jest to Graciano Lopez Haina. Nagbibiro lang siya. Um, when he said that. So you can say that. You can say that some historians pieced it together, romanticized their deaths, especially since maraming hagiographies about Panganiban yung naisulat. And marami, nung nag-literature review ako, I even had to exclude some kasi talagang niro-romanticize si Panganiban all throughout. And I do not recall a biography or any account that mentions the scandal except Raquel Reyes's Love, Passion, and Patriotism. Yun lang yung na-encounter ko. But all the other biographies hindi ko siya na-encounter. Kasi hagiographic nga siya. So they tend to praise Panganiban or romanticize Panganiban, not just his death, but also his life.
Okay. Thank you. An insight
Si Vanessa.
from Ms. Romero. Okay. TB is actually rampant up until now. Yeah, just to give a context, she's also doing a biomath. She's doing dengue, but I think she also encountered the TB in her models. So
I
TB is
see.
actually rampant up until now. Until no, especially in the especially in the third world countries. A source even said that 70% of the population ng Pilipinas has TB. We just don't know who caused TB has a latent stage or it will take years for symptoms to appear.
That's true. That's true. One doctor friend of mine said that TB is actually endemic to the Philippines. So endemic. Kasama tayo sa mga countries na listed na endemic yung tuberculosis natin. Magandang statistic yun, 70%, at least nabigyan tayo ng figure ni Vanessa. 70% may TB. Yun nga lang, sabi ko kanina, yung iba kasi latent yung kanilang tuberculosis. So hindi pa nagma-manifest yung mga symptoms. Yung coronavirus kasi, di ba, parang a few days baka mag-manifest yung symptoms. So yun. Pero yung TB kasi, it can last for years. Malay natin may bacteria ka sa lungs, hindi lang nagma-manifest yung symptoms dahil malakas yung macrophages or yung immune system ng katawan mo. But yeah, malakas yung immune system, pero some cases can be latent. Some are already there, manifest kagad. So di natin alam talaga kung kailan mag-appear yung symptoms. But yes, Vanessa is right to point out that it's endemic in the Philippines, in the Philippine population.
Okay. I guess probably it was a very entertaining and engaging discussions. We have a lots of questions this evening. Siguro before we take dinner, probably last question that it's a bit general question. I'm asking this for some emerging scholars or budding historians or social scientists here in Bicol. Are there, aside from Panganiban, are there any like nationalist historical figures that they can also venture or further graduate studies or local undergraduate theses for history or social sciences.
I see. Historical figures, maganda rin tingnan si Tomas at Ludovico Arejola, although there were already studies on those two figures. Maganda rin tingnan si Justo Rillas Lucban ng Camarines Norte. Although si Lucban kasi mas nakilala siya sa Manila kaysa sa Camarines Norte. But still, he's a native of Camarines Norte. Sino pa ba yung magandang tingnan? Yeah, the Arejola brothers are from Nueva Cáceres. Sa Albay, I'm not so sure sino pa, mga imperial ng Albay. And then Sorsogon, yung elites din ng Sorsogon, I'm not so sure kung sino-sino. Pero maraming mga pwedeng mahanap sa archives. Ano. Sa ngayon, siguro yung nationalist figures na sabi mo, siguro yun muna may bibigay ko. Si Tomas Arejola, Ludovico, Justo Lucban, Tomas Prieto. Isa sa mga 15 martires, si Tomas Prieto. Classmate, siya ni Panganiban sa seminaryo. Sabay silang pinadala sa UST. At nag-aral si Panganiban ng medicine, si Prieto naman ay nag-pharmacy. The only difference is nakatapos si Prieto, pumalik siya dito. Yun nga lang kasama siya dun sa 15 martires. 11 martyrs na binaril sa Bagong Bayan.
Okay, ayan. Marami pa po tayong pwedeng ma-explore aside from Panganiban. So, we encourage students and other scholars to also venture other local and national figures in Bicol, Bicolanos. No? So, marami pa pong opportunities to venture. So, I guess we can do more. We can do more on this. We can para also meron kasing iba, I guess, they only know Jose Maria Panganiban dahil street siya sa Naga because of the Panganiban Avenue. But
Panganiban Drive.
The figure behind the man. So, on behalf of the organizing committee, nagpapasalamat po kami, Sir DJ sa iyong time and scholarship for this evening. So, maraming salamat po. Also, thank you sa participants natin sa Zoom and sa Facebook Live. So tomorrow we'll be talking about the biopolitics of the pandemic, of the new normal with Dr. Eric Lantoneo of the Ateneo Dinaga University. So see you guys tomorrow at 3 p.m. Philippine time. So mabalos po again. Thank you and good evening. Salamat, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Earl.
May pahabol pa si Darren.
Nasagutin ko na lang yan. Mamaya sa chat. Thank you, Earl. Thank you. Thank you, PSU.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Dito.